Greetings. Last night, Yeshaya Ma'arab, also known as Mr. Blacktastic, put up an interesting post, and I'll share a link to his post in the video description. I really appreciate his post, as in it, he captured a new prediction from Yakoba of Ministries. You see, back on May 17th, Yakoba wrote the following on Facebook, quote, I think I got another revelation, and it appears that the exodus into the wilderness will not be until 2030, no later than 2033. This may be why they have Agenda 2030. It is because they knew when we would leave. End quote. Now, when I read that, my immediate thought was that Yakoba is starting to remind me just a little bit of Tahar from GMS. And he reminds me of Tahar in a couple of different ways, or at least he brings to mind Tahar in a couple of different ways. So I wanted to make a very quick video just noting a couple of minor parallels, if you will. So the first parallel is that both Yakoba and Tahar have this tendency to promote themselves as doing deep readings of the prophecies in Scripture, when in reality they're actually just using super simplistic reasoning, right? For example, as many know, Tahar is infamous for falsely predicting that the world would end by the year 2000. Here are a couple clips of him saying such back in 1998.
America's going to be wiped off the face of the planet Earth. That's going to take place before the year 2000. That's right. America has less than 628 days before this country is taken out in thermonuclear destruction.
So that raises a question. What made Tahar think that Christ would come back by the year 2000? Now, of course, the simple answer is that he got that teaching from the leadership at One West. He got it from Ariyah. But it's also worth noting that Tahar found that persuasive because they were all just taking Hosea 6:2, which reads in part, after 2 days he will revive us. And then they were lining that up with the part of 2 Peter 3:8, which reads, 1 day is with the Lord as 1,000 years, right? So they're saying, all right, a day is like 1,000 years. He's going to, the Lord is going to revive us after 2 days. So 2,000 years, right? And, more than 20 years after being proven wrong, Tahar remains unrepentant, right? To this day, he won't admit that the problem was with his own bad reasoning. And instead, him and certain other One Westers that, from that time, from the 90s, who followed the One West leadership in predicting the world would end in the year 2000, they all just try to pretend like God switched the plan up on them, right? So in a sense, it's God's fault that they got that wrong. But getting back to Yakoba, we should ask the question of how he arrived at the conclusion that the so-called second Exodus will happen no later than 2033. Well, like Tahar, Yakoba constantly presents himself, as I said, as doing these deep dives on prophecy, when in reality he's just filtering a very basic or crude reading of Scripture through sensationalist stuff in the news, or now, with social media, sensationalist stuff in his news feed. For a quick example of his methodology, remember that when the murder hornets were part of, the talk on social media, Yakoba was alluding to that bit of hysteria being somehow a fulfillment of prophecy.
Murder hornets! Murder hornets!
Have you even seen one?
Murder hornets!
And so in this latest line of reasoning from Yakoba, in this Facebook post that you saw at the beginning of the video, Yakoba mentioned Agenda 2030, which is currently among the sensationalism du jour, on social media. And so Yakoba is linking that with the premise that Christ died somewhere between the year 30 and the year 33, of the first century of the Common Era. And then, you just take 2,000 years and you add it to that, and voila, right? You suddenly arrive at the confident conclusion that the second Exodus will happen no later than 2033. And Yakoba doesn't see just how simplistic and cheap that reasoning is. Like Tahar, he actually thinks that circumventing Christ's declaration that no man knows the hour would actually be that easy, right? And with that in mind, a second parallel that I sense is that, like with Tahar, one might feel as though there's going to be little chance of there being an opportunity to test Yakoba's claim, right? The year 2033, or let's say 2034, that year is a decade away. And Yakoba might not be mixed up with this silliness anymore by then, or you or I may have moved on to other topics by then. And honestly, who knows which of us will even be around by then. But it still might be worth saving Yakoba's post, as what I've found is that these decade plus time frames can transpire really quickly, more quickly than you might have anticipated or felt at the beginning of that. And to illustrate this, I'm going to play a clip of Tahar saying back in 2009 that if you have a 3-year-old daughter, you shouldn't be setting aside money for her college, with the tacit reasoning being that, because we'll be out of here way before then. Now, as a warning, Tahar uses some profanity in this clip, so the audio is not suitable for certain settings like work or places of worship or certain family settings. But with that warning out of the way, here's the clip of Tahar back in 2009.
Isaiah 19 and 16.
Right, what person are you ought ye to be?
Man of manual.
An all holy conversation. In other words, this is the mindset you're supposed to be in, that this man is going down.
Right.
Not talking about what you're going to do in the year, you got a daughter, she's 3, and you talking about when she hits 16, you're going to have a sweet, ain't going to be no sweet 16, man.
College.
Talking about putting money away for a college fund. Fuck a goddamn college fund, man.
That's right.
Spend that shit. That's right. I'm dead serious, man. Go ahead.
Well, here we are 14 years later. A girl who was 3 years old back in March of 2009 is going to be 17 years old today. And so she's just about ready for college. Back in 2009, the ability to test Tahar's claim might have seemed really far away. Yet here we are, And in 2034, Yakoba might still be around. And like Tahar, he might still be just as unrepentant, just as unwilling to not only admit how wrong he was, but also unwilling to concede that the problem was with his own reasoning. I mean, honestly, his reasoning might be the same in 2034. There's always a war or a riot or a natural disaster or some other, cataclysmic event happening somewhere in the world, somewhere in the West. So, in 2034, Yakoba might just do what he's done for the last few years, right? He might just point to whatever bit of sensationalism or hysteria is in the news and then treat that as a sign that his vindication is right around the corner. Hence why it might be worthwhile to save that post, just a little bit of food for thought. But with that, I'll close this brief video here. As always, I welcome any comments, questions, or criticisms. As I often point out, I don't censor anyone here, so please feel free to share your thoughts, whether positive or negative. And with that, God bless.